So the picking a story is really complicated. Do you want to hear about like
I
our
would love to.
curation efforts? Yeah. So essentially every morning, well, I guess Monday, Wednesday, Friday, technically, we are sending out a newsletter. So the writing process for, the Monday, Wednesday, or Friday edition of the newsletter would start on Tuesday, Thursday, or Sunday. So I'm literally scanning through every possible news source of marketing and advertising news that exists in the world. Like, if you go on Ad Age right now, I've read every single article on Ad Age. I could guarantee it, or at least skimmed it, right? Like I know what my readers would be interested in. So I'm doing that on legitimately every website that is talking about marketing news, at least 3 mornings a week. And then my co-writer and I each compile all of the story ideas that we have into a doc based off of news that's been going on or pitches that have been sent to us or, things we're thinking about, trends we're thinking about and find interesting in the industry. And then we have a pitch meeting with our editor where we sort of just chip away like a nice sculpture at what really matters. What are the 3 things in the marketing industry in the past 48 hours that are going to matter to our readers tomorrow morning, right? And then after that, we go ahead and get writing. But when I started Marketing Brew, I had a lot of catching up to do on what was newsworthy on channels that were not just social, right? So we honestly did all these different reader calls to talk about marketers that already read Morning Brew, were already fans of the brew, but what they'd be excited to see in a Marketing Brew newsletter. That's why I think that newsletters are so similar to social in that way, in that I always had the restraints of 280 characters or, a certain image size or whatever. And now newsletters are just larger boundaries, but similar idea of like, okay, you have this big idea and you're putting it into these tiny constraints. How do we communicate this effectively?
Now let's get into that writing system that you said, where you go from pitching your ideas to the editor. You now have a short list of all the ideas, stories you want to cover. You've got some sources from when you did the research. How do you go from idea to that first draft?
From idea to that first draft. So typically I do a lot of source interview calls before I ever pitch. So in my ideal world, before that pitch even happens, I've done an interview with whatever source I want to talk to. And that interview is transcribed and ready for me to pick apart and put into a draft. Occasionally it's not. Occasionally my editor and I will talk about what we want in interview questions for one of our sources before we even go ahead and give that interview. So yeah, obviously essentially TLDR before the first draft, I have to have for the majority of stories, right? Like original reporting. If it's not just curation stuff, then we have to have a transcript of an interview. But yeah, then how it goes from there to first draft is, I don't know, I think it's weird, right? The way that I personally write, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I do think it's good advice for everybody, is to not worry so much about what the structure of the story is going to be or, how you're going to get from point A to B to C in the story. Just write what you've just told your editor the story is going to be about and get it all on a piece of paper. I don't care if it's 150 words, like the shorter stories in Marketing Brew are. I don't care if it's, 300 to 400 words, like that top story always is. Just write what is in your head and what you've spoken about. And then once that's there, you're like, okay, what don't I need? You take away everything you don't need. Okay, how can I make this information more digestible for a newsletter reader who's oftentimes reading this information on their phone, but for somebody that might also be looking at it on their laptop, who is this age and in this marketing discipline, blah, blah, blah. So then all those more critical, editorial, analytical factors come in during the editing process, right? So can you see how it's my first drafts are so quick? I think that they say, there's that Ernest Hemingway saying, write drunk, edit sober. And that's a great saying, but you definitely don't need to get drunk. Have you heard the phrase, kill your darlings?
I do, but I'd like to hear your definition.
Yeah, it essentially means that sometimes you'll write a piece and you'll write you just think you had a brilliant idea, right? And there's a sentence that you feel like you wrote so well. And then in the editing process, that sentence or that thought is just no longer relevant to what the story is actually becoming about. And you have to get rid of it, So that's, yeah. I do that every day. It's the most painful aspect of my job.